in that moment in System Shock, which is just leagues above everything else and might have been the most groundbreaking game, first-person shooter of all time. Now, before I get into my own suggestion here as to the winner of what I think the most groundbreaking FPSs of all time, I want to mention several people that are new to the community, and very glad to see you all. First of all, I mentioned Shrimpy Man. Welcome to the community. Bobby LeChimp. Very creative name. Welcome, welcome. Glad to see you among us in the community. Also, I believe German-based Silger, S-Y-L-G-R. Welcome, welcome to the community. Great to have you. And Neptune Gears. Also, great to have you all with the community. Hope to see much contribution from all of you moving forward. It's great to see how we've kind of picked people up over the course of time, and we keep continuing to grow our audience. Keep going. The contributions, as always, keep the Weekly Ringer moving. So, now I have to get on to what I think is my choice for the most groundbreaking FPS of all time. This is a really tough one for me, guys. I have so many FPSs that I've played over the years and love, and I think of note, many of you mentioned something like the many iterations of some of these games, a la Counter-Strike, or Action Quake, for example, or Team Deathmatch, or things like that. Team Fortress, I mean. Not Team Deathmatch, Team Fortress. All those things are great, but I think if I'm going to be honest with you here, I'm going to say that the most groundbreaking first-person shooter of all time is Half-Life. And the reason why I say Half-Life is because of everything I've already said. It is the first game that I ever played, and I know System Shock really sets the table for this. And System Shock is fully 3D, right? But Half-Life perfects the form. It really gets to what so many things now have to do. In order to create something like Rage, one of the reasons that I'm hearing that Rage is so empty is because it is a game of shooting and blowing things up that doesn't get to the story and doesn't tell a story that's engrossing enough in a world that's engrossing enough. And I'm going to take it over BioShock, even though BioShock to me exists because Half-Life does the job so well and sets the table so well. System Shock, then Half-Life, and I know it's not even from the same family of games a la System Shock, but BioShock was a great experience, and after a while, I have to say, even though I was very much following the story and it was very important, it wasn't like Half-Life. I still got to the point in BioShock where I knew the mechanics. I was aware of the gun, the ammunition I was using, and that it was just kind of a game where I needed to get the most ammunition to kill the most people with. And the boss fight was very epic and it was wonderful. But I never had that feeling in Half-Life. I was always so into the experience. As soon as you turned it on, you dropped right in to Half-Life. And you drop right into it again, and it's all about, oh my God, I'm Gordon Freeman, and I'm trying to save the world, and I'm trying to get through this universe, and I'm just trying to survive at the end of the day. And that's why I would post Half-Life up there as the most groundbreaking first-person shooter of all time, although many of you had some tremendous suggestions. Going along those lines, I wanted to mention a few that were of note, but I thought didn't make the list, and I wanted to mention them. Descent. Now, Descent was not a first-person shooter, but just the fact that Descent came up in any conversation means I'm doing my job correctly here on the Clan of the Grey Wolf here on the Weekly Ringer, because Descent was a tremendous game. One of the first games I ever played on PC that just made me go, wow, that is awesome. Serious Sam of every iteration might be my favorite first-person shooter of all time, and I really mean that. And the new iteration of Serious Sam, BFG, is coming out very soon. Cannot wait for that, folks. That's going to be awesome. Just wait. Those guys at Crow Team know what they're doing, and Serious Sam has never failed to disappoint. Daikatana was on the list. I know it got mentioned, I have to say it. I actually owned that game for Nintendo 64. It was terrible. It tried to do way too much. It was way too, I guess, out there. It was way too ambitious. It didn't get anything done that it was supposed to get done. Daikatana sucks. Everybody knows it. So Daikatana got mentioned. I feel like I needed to mention that as well, because after all, what's talking about the best of a genre if we can at least poke a little fun at the games that are far from the best and are probably some of the worst, and it definitely was one. Serious Sam 3D, or Serious Sam, I guess Serious Sam 3D is probably the game because that was a first-person shooter. Serious Sam actually debuted, was not a first-person shooter. But 3D Realms turned Serious Sam into a first-person shooter in Serious Sam 3D. That was a good game, but really honest to me, it was kind of like a Wolfenstein with fun. You know, being able to comment on strippers and things like that. That's fun, but that doesn't really make it a great game. And I think all of you would probably agree with me. That does not make a great experience. Anyway, those games were of note. They were mentioned out there, and I just thought I would tie that out there. The other thing I wanted to mention was Rise of the Triad, also a tremendously cool game. I don't think it is the most groundbreaking. I think it really is kind of a Doom clone. It really used the id Tech engine as far as I know. And although it did have a very different look and feel than Doom, it still had that kind of essence of Doom tied to it, to where you couldn't really get out of it. It's the way something like Soldier of Fortune, you know, which utilized what engine did it use? Unreal. I think it utilized the Unreal. No, actually used it used an id Tech engine, the way Unreal did. Now, Unreal was another one of my favorite games. That was a great game. The engine is tremendous and has been used in so many different games since. But Unreal doesn't reach the threshold, in my opinion, of being one of the most groundbreaking first-person shooters. All right. That leads us to the part of the show every week where now I have to announce what I think we need to think about for next week. And I want to preface this with this question, with this thought. I started to watch Game of Thrones recently, and I have to say, you know, it hasn't been amazing. It hasn't been unbelievable, but I've gotten into it. I think I like it. It's a pretty cool little game. Listen to me. We've been talking about games too long. It's a pretty decent show, especially for the budget. I think they do a great job in terms of presentation. And if you're going to do fantasy, you better do fantasy right. Which led me to think that I wanted to ask a question about some of the, let's say, more fantastical shows of note. Because I want to talk about TV for a little while. I think that's a good way to get back to some of the other things. We've talked about games for a while and Steve Jobs and technology. Let's talk about TV on this week's Weekly Ringer. So I wanted to ask you this week, and Game of Thrones could be included. Is Game of Thrones the best fantasy television show ever made? That's the question I want you to answer for me on the Weekly Ringer. Is Game of Thrones the greatest fantasy TV show that's ever been made? If not, tell me why. Let me know what's going on. What do you think should be there in its place if it isn't? And if it is, tell me why as well. I'd love to know why you think Game of Thrones is great. But for now, I think I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for watching. As always, everybody, make sure to get those contributions in before I go to record the video next week along with the new cadence and not with the old one. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for contributing. Thanks for making the Weekly Ringer the success that it is. I am the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf. I'm going to get back to my thoughts now, and there is no reset button.